All right, hello everybody, elementary community of PK Young. My name is Ashley Pennypacker Hill, and I am our Director of Elementary Programs. And this webinar is going to focus on grading for elementary at PK Young. We wanted to make sure that we took some time to explain what's going on with our standards-based grading system. And so you'll be able to refer back to this at any time when you get your report cards or if you have any questions. So hopefully this will be a great resource for you. Okay, so standards-based grading, and you hear it referred to as standards-based grading or standards-based assessment. You'll hear both terms used. Basically, what that means is teachers are organizing evidence of student progress towards goals. And we're hoping that by the end of the school year, they are going to master every goal that's put in front of them for that grade level. And then within specific subject areas, there'll be standards-based assessment for reading, writing, math, science, and social studies. And you will see that reported to you all along the way. So here's an example of what this process will look like. I thought this was kind of a cool visual here. So right here, where everybody learns a new skill, and you can think about this for you as an adult too, right? We learn a new skill, then we practice that skill. And then most of the time, most of us are going to make some mistakes. We're not going to come out perfect as we're learning a new skill. So we make a lot of mistakes. We analyze and fix mistakes. And as teachers and parents, what we do is we provide support when our students are trying to learn new skills and fixing their mistakes. Then many times the teacher will do some type of assessment or a quiz on that skill to check in and see where the student is in terms of their progress towards that. Are they mastering or are they not? What do they need now with that skill? Many times they're still going to make mistakes and they're still learning. They're in that formative process. We're asking for help. Students are asking for help. And if they're not asking for help, we're coaching them on how to ask for help. The student is then analyzing, fixing mistakes, still practicing the skill. Something that's a little bit different here at PK is then we offer opportunities for students to then get reassessed on that skill. So it's not as if you get a quiz and then that's going to be your grade forever. You're going to get reassessed, and you can see this little line right here. It says repeat as needed, because the goal is for the student to learn the skill, right? So you might repeat, say you get a score for a standard that is not meeting or it's approaching. You're going to come back here, you're going to make some more mistakes, you're going to ask for help, you're going to analyze and fix the mistakes, you're going to practice the skill, and then you're going to get reassessed again. We might stay in this loop for weeks, for a day, all year, several years. It really depends on the student and depends on the skill, but you can see ultimately we want to then have the student demonstrate mastery. So that's the goal at the end of the school year, is that students will demonstrate mastery in all skills. All right, so as a parent, what are the ways that you can check your student progress as they're going along their journey and learning these new skills? So one way is through Seesaw, which is an app you can get on your phone or you can look on it on your computer. Elementary teachers will show families evidence of student work through that app. And so what's really cool about that app is it will not just be a score. It's like your student's name and a score. You can see kids actually making videos and showing you as the family, this is what I got, or let me read you this thing. And so there's lots of different ways. It's pretty dynamic piece of technology. So I would check that. I would check that every week. Your teachers are going to be sending evidence of student work every week along through Seesaw. Home folders in elementary, every learning community does home folders differently. So some will do them daily, some will do them just on Friday. You want to check with your learning community leader or your classroom teacher to see how often home folders will come home. But many times in those home folders, student work, the actual student work will come home. So it won't just be through Seesaw. You'll get to put your hands on it and touch it, and your student can talk you through it that way. The other way that you can check student progress is through Skyward. Many families check that at the end of the 9 weeks, and that's a little bit different in secondary and elementary. So for elementary, you'll always check it at the end of the 9 weeks. That's where the report cards will live. If you check it every week, it's not going to be updated because what's getting updated is through Seesaw. Okay, so quarterly progress reports. This is through Skyward. So at the end of each 9 weeks or a quarter, the student progress will be formally reported out through a report card. If you are like me, you're used to a more traditional grading system where at the end of the 9 weeks, you get your grades, and then the next 9 weeks, you get to start over and you start from scratch. That is not how standards-based assessment works. So progress is cumulative and the assessment is cumulative throughout the whole school year. So what you get in the first quarter is connected to the second quarter, which is connected to the third quarter, and it's all building up to the fourth quarter, which is where you get your final assessment based on all the standards. So that final quarter grade, that last 9 weeks, that's what's going to go on an elementary student's transcript. This is a bit different than secondary, if you have a secondary student and you're familiar with how their transcripts work. For elementary, it's that final grade that's going to go on a transcript. Okay, so now let's look at the quarters differently, because quarters 1, 2, and 3 are different than the fourth quarter, or the fourth 9 weeks. So the first quarter and the second quarter and the third quarter, those are not included on student transcripts. So really, what I'm hoping you're thinking is like, oh, well, it's not that it doesn't count, but it's really, we're doing all of the progress monitoring is the way I think of it, to then at the fourth quarter, that's when the final grade comes. So it's not on student transcripts, and this is what you'll see. These are the marks that you'll see on quarters 1 through 3. You'll see a student either meeting benchmarks, on track, below benchmark, not meeting, or not assessed. And so let's talk through each one of those because they're going to be different than maybe what you're used to. So let me make sure you understand this chart here. So we've got the report card categories up here on top. So you can see meeting benchmark, on track, below benchmark, not meeting benchmark, and not assessed. And then here are the category definitions. So let's run through these. So for meeting benchmark, that means that a student is showing evidence of meeting the end of school year standard. So remember, quarters 1, 2, and 3, we're still marking your progress towards that end of year standard. So if you are meeting and it's quarter 1, for example, that means right here, you can see the goal progress. That means you're above where you need to be, because most of the time you're not going to be meeting the benchmark right at the very beginning, because it's actually an end of year benchmark, but some students will. And so if your student gets a meeting during quarters 1 through 3, that means they're above. And then you can see the support needed. There's not additional support needed for them to access the benchmark. They probably do need some type of enrichment, and you would want to be talking to your student's teacher about that, because if they're already meeting and it's quarters 1 through 3, they really need to get that push and get that enrichment. Okay, now let's go through on track. So if a student is on track during quarters 1 through 3, that means this right here. So the student is on track showing evidence of meeting the end of school year standard or benchmark. So that means they're right where they need to be. If you picture kind of like you're going on a trip and maybe you have marked out, like, by the end of the first day, we're driving across the country, by the end of the first day, we know we need to be out of the state of Florida, and the first day, yep, in fact, you're out of the state of Florida, you're right on track. So it doesn't mean you've already gotten to your destination, right? You haven't met the end of year standard yet. It just means that you're right where you need to be. We're good, we're on track. And you can see the goal progress on track, and no additional support is needed. You don't need to, as a family, you don't need to be super concerned or think that we need a bunch of outside tutoring or anything. You're right where you need to be. We're doing it. We're good. Now let's talk through below benchmark. So for below benchmark, that means that the student is showing some evidence of meeting end of school year standards. So you can see this difference. They're showing some evidence. Oops. Oh goodness. Here we are. They're showing some evidence. That means they're not meeting the benchmark. They're not on track. They're just kind of showing some evidence of that end of year standard. This means that they are actually not where they're supposed to be, that they are below benchmark, and they're not on track, and they're definitely not meeting, right? They're below. So if they're going on their trip, they have not left the state of Florida yet. They're behind on their trip. And so you can see down here, the support that is needed is they are in need of some intervention. Some students, you can see that very clearly right at the very beginning of the year. Some students, it kind of reveals itself throughout different portions of the year. You may start on track, but then as the standards start growing, then maybe in quarter 3, you end up below benchmark because it's just gotten to be a little bit too much. So every student is going to be different, and I would really rely on your learning community leaders and your classroom teachers, or you can always reach out to me too, to help make sense of this. Let's look at this one. So not meeting benchmark. This is when the student is not showing evidence of meeting the expectations of the end of the school year standards. So you can see right here, the goal progress, they are significantly below, and they're going to need intensive intervention. So they're not showing some evidence, they're not on track, and they're not meeting the benchmark. They are, in fact, not meeting the benchmark. And if you were somebody, you're with me on this metaphor and you're on the trip, they're probably really struggling even getting in the car. Right? Maybe they haven't started their trip yet, or they're trying to start their trip, but they're just not there yet. So these students will be in our highest level of intervention, and they're significantly below. And so we'll be doing a lot of work with them. You can see this last column right here, not assessed. So in quarters 1 through 3, especially sometimes in quarter 1, some of the standards haven't been taught yet because it's just the beginning of the school year. So you'll see it says the standard's not assessed, goal progress. Well, we don't have the goal to progress to, and support needed is NA2. So you'll see that on the report card sometimes too. You'll see it'll say not assessed. Okay, now for quarter 4, it's different than quarters 1, 2, and 3. This is the end. So the final leg of the trip, and these scores will be included on the student transcripts. And what you'll see there are meeting, approaching, beginning, or not meeting. And so this will end up being kind of like their final grades in elementary. And you can see it indicates the final performance in relationship to the standards. Let's look at this so we can see it clearer though. Okay. So if you are a student who is meeting, that means the student is showing evidence of meeting the end of school year standard. That means that they are on grade level. They're ending the year exactly where we want them. They're meeting the standard. They're on grade level. Here's this goal progress. They're likely to exceed in the next course or grade. And if you're like me, you're used to traditional letter grades. So if my student is getting meeting on a math standard for addition 0 to 10 facts, and they've got a meeting, what does that really mean? Well, that in more traditional minds, it means they got an A, a B, somewhere around there, depending on all of the different standards for math, for example. Okay, so for approaching, Some students may get approaching on standards. This says that the student is showing some evidence of meeting the end of school standard, but you can see that they're not meeting. They haven't met the standard, but they are showing some evidence of meeting. They're approaching the standard. And that means they're approaching grade level, but they're not on grade level. This means that these students may need some additional support for the next grade or course. Now, when you look at the report cards, there's going to be lots of different standards. So if you take math, for example, a student may be meeting, and then have an approaching, and then a meeting, and then an approaching. And so some students, you may not get meeting on everything, and approaching it's not bad necessarily. It just means that they're going to need additional support for that specific standard. And the traditional letter grade would be more like a B or a C. So they're not hitting that A, B, they're more like a low B or a C. For beginning, some students may get beginning for standards. So that means that the student is beginning to show evidence of meeting end of year school standard. So that means that they are just starting to show that they might be able to access that standard. It does mean that they're not on grade level because they're not approaching, they're not even almost there, and they aren't meeting. They're just beginning. They're just starting to get ready with that standard. So if you get a beginning on a report card, that means for that standard, the student is likely to need substantial support for the next grade level or course. Now, if you get a lot of beginnings, for example, if you look at the math section of the report card and you get a lot of beginnings, that really is a cause for concern. Most of the time, though, what you'll see probably a lot of meetings, and you might see some approachings and very few beginning. But like we've said, every student is going to be different. And so make sure that you check in with your learning community leaders or your classroom teacher or me, and we can talk you through what we can do to make sure that your student isn't at beginning. We want them to be meeting on as many things as possible here. Okay, and so here's this last column is not meeting. So this is when the student is not showing evidence of meeting the expectations of the end of school year standard. So that means that they're not on grade level, just like beginning, but this is below beginning. So beginning is like they're showing that they're starting to be able to access that standard. Not meeting means they're not even showing that there's any evidence towards the standard. So if a student is getting a not meeting, they're highly likely to need substantial support for the next grade level. Those students, if you're getting a significant amount of not meetings, we're going to be having you in our highest level of intervention, and we'll be talking about several other things if we're getting a lot of not meetings. All right. So again, to talk through letter grades. So in elementary, students will not receive traditional letter grades like A, B, C, D, F on their report card. But we did just talk through how they would correlate, just so you have it in your head. In secondary, so in 6th through 12th grade, students will receive letter grades on their report card. So once they hit middle school, they're going to start seeing letter grades. All right. So if you have a student that is in the approaching or meeting category for many of their standards, and it's the end of the school year or even quarters 1 through 3, that means that the student is performing at grade level, or it could mean that they're performing above grade level. And so this, as a school, we're going to be recommending enrichment opportunities in school and outside of school. And we're going to want to start the school year in a challenging small group for a specific subject, because sometimes you'll see kids will get meetings in reading, but maybe not in math, or vice versa. Every student's different. We have tons of different things we can do to make sure that students' needs are being met, either in school or outside of school. So I would really suggest speaking with your teacher or your learning community leader, or I'm always happy to speak with you too about ways we can make sure that your student is staying challenged. Okay, what if your student is in the beginning or not meeting category? And so oftentimes what we will talk about with you is summer school. That's an option that we have here at PK. We will recommend if you have the ability to get some outside tutoring outside of school. Often too, we will provide tutoring after school as well. We may talk with you about having your student repeat that grade level. So we got to give it a go. We're going to try again and do this grade level again and see if we can meet standards if we do that grade level for a second time. We also may speak with you about getting consent to do a full psychoeducational evaluation through the school. And you would reach out, we would connect you with our special education department. We also may ask, because sometimes students are already getting services outside of school. And so we may ask to have consent from you to share with those outside providers. So school and outside can stay connected, and when we can make sure that we're providing wraparound services for your student. And also, we will then be starting your student in the next school year in the highest level of intervention or support. And then, as you can see, there's other things. It really is student dependent. All right, as a family, what is it that you could be doing throughout the school year to help your student? We get this question a lot. In general, every student's going to be different, right? But in general, home reading is key. If you can do home reading every night with your student, that's so helpful. And it depends on the grade level. K1's home reading looks different than 2 3s, than 4 5s. So make sure you know what the expectation is for each grade level. And then math homework, and this will look different for each grade level too, but in general, there'll be some math homework coming home. Sit down with your student and do it with them. See where they're struggling, see where they get it really fast. See how their teachers teaching them. And sometimes it's a bit different than how we learned. With the math homework, you will see there will be pages coming home helping you as a family know how to help your kid too, because sometimes it's with some of this math, it's like, I don't know how to help you. And so we've got support coming home, so then you know how to help your kid with the math at home. There's also home link activities that's connected to our morning meeting curriculum. It's called Caring School Community. The students will be coming home with that, and it's a nice time for you to write with your student. They'll ask you questions about yourself and your family, and it's a good time for you all to connect. There's also a lot of apps. There's a lot of technology out there that we can suggest for you and your student. And again, it'll depend on your student's needs. All of this is available through Clever, and your student will probably know how to access it faster than you will. But if you need more information on that, reach out to your classroom teacher, your learning community leader, and they can help you get access to a lot of pieces of technology that can support at home. And I've said it several times throughout this webinar, but the number one thing you can do is connect with your students' teachers and the learning community leaders and me and all of us. So we're here to help you. We're in this business to support kids and change lives and help families. So please reach out to us, and it's what we love to do. We would love to sit down with you and connect with you about your student and make sure that education is personalized as much as possible. So we're meeting your needs and we're meeting your students' needs. All right. If you have any other questions that have come up throughout this webinar, reach out to your student's teacher, learning community leader, or me, and we would be happy to connect with you. All right. Thanks for watching.